Welcome to Twisted Truths, where betrayal meets brutal payback, and where the most unexpected twists expose what people are really capable of. This story isn't just shocking, it's personal. My name is Dale. I'm 36. And last Thanksgiving was the night I decided I'd had enough. The dining table was covered in roasted turkey, gravy boats, cranberry sauce, and all the trimmings. My sister, Camille, had outdone herself with the decor: gold leaf place cards, ivory napkins folded like swans, and a crystal chandelier glittering above us like a crown over a royal court. And me? I was the jester. I sat quietly at the end of the long table, nursing a glass of wine that cost more than my entire weekly grocery bill. My family, the Pattersons, were well-off, well-spoken, and well-fed. They were also, for lack of a better word, brutal. Camille was going on about her new beach house in Destin, Florida. It's not just beachfront, she beamed. It's got a wine cellar, a hot tub that seats 12, and the master suite has a freaking chandelier. I had it custom made. The room erupted in applause. Next to speak was my brother Leo, grinning from ear to ear like a politician at a press conference. My company just closed a Series B round, $50 million in funding. Looks like I'll be opening a second office in London. Another round of cheers. Even my father, who rarely smiled unless stocks were up, raised a glass in approval. Then came the dreaded moment. Camille turned to me with that sugar-sweet venom she specialized in. And you, Dale? What about your world? Still fixing little websites for small businesses? Still living in that same apartment with the broken mailbox? The laughter was instantaneous. I smiled, but my hand tightened around my wine glass. Yeah, I said simply. Still working with code. Still fixing broken things. My mother, ever the silent judge, offered a quiet, disappointed sigh. My father didn't even look up from his plate. No one at that table knew the truth. Not a single one of them. They didn't know that I, Dale Patterson, the deadbeat, the failure, the one they always overlooked, was the anonymous founder of Crescendo Technologies, the same AI firm that recently made headlines after signing a $200 million licensing deal with several Fortune 500 companies. They didn't know the man they laughed at was the same one who'd been quietly funding their very lifestyle. Camille's beach house. She bought it with a loan she didn't know was underwritten by one of my shell investment firms. Leo's tech company. Half of his seed funding came from a venture fund I set up anonymously. Even my father's hedge fund had unknowingly taken investment capital from one of my firms. I'd helped keep it afloat during the 2020 crash without ever attaching my name. But to them, I was still just Dale. The black sheep. The punchline. That night, I realized something chilling: it wasn't enough for me to succeed quietly anymore. They needed to be reminded, forcefully, of the one truth they refused to accept. You don't get to laugh at the person holding the strings. I left the dinner early that night, claiming I had a client call. No one protested. In fact, Camille barely even looked up from her wine as she said, "Don't work too hard, Dale. Thanksgiving's for family." Family. That word sat bitter on my tongue. I drove home in silence. No music. Just the hum of the road and my thoughts replaying every snide comment, every dismissive chuckle. I'd been tolerating this for years, swallowing their condescension like it was communion. And for what? So they could feel bigger. So I could avoid confrontation. My apartment was quiet. Sparse. Clean. Nothing extravagant, just a simple place where I could think. Where I could build. No beach house, no London office, but within these four walls was the heart of Crescendo Technologies. The company I'd created from nothing. The platform that now powered data analysis for dozens of major corporations. Still, none of that mattered to my family. Not because it wasn't impressive, but because they didn't know. And maybe that was my fault. I chose anonymity. I never wanted my face in tech magazines or Forbes lists. I wanted to build, not brand myself. But I also didn't expect that choice to become a noose they'd gleefully pull tighter year after year. I opened my laptop and stared at the dashboard, millions in current contracts, ongoing negotiations with 3 government agencies, and an inbox filled with praise from CEOs and CTOs. But all I could hear was Leo's voice. Still fixing websites. All I could see was Camille's smirk. Still living in that same apartment. I clicked into a secure folder labeled, Backup Plan, Robinson Holdings, a name I used for the holding group that quietly owned shares in their businesses, assets they never realized weren't entirely theirs. I'd funded Camille's mortgage through a financing group I controlled. The deed had a clause. If she ever defaulted or violated certain conditions, the house would revert to the lender. Leo's startup. I held 27% of the company under a different Shell Corp name. He had no idea that the guy who signed those early checks, David Langston, from Southfield Growth Fund, was really me. Even Dad's hedge fund had taken an influx of capital last year under distressed terms when the market dipped. I'd offered a lifeline anonymously, using Crescendo's profits, just to keep him from laying off half his staff. And now I was wondering why I ever bothered. I thought I was helping. I thought maybe if I kept them afloat long enough, they'd evolve. Learn humility. Maybe even reach out to me like a real brother, a real son. But they hadn't changed. If anything, they'd gotten worse. Flashier. Meaner. Louder. My phone buzzed. A text from Camille. Sorry if we teased you too hard tonight. You know we love you, right? Face blowing a kiss. I stared at the screen. That wasn't love. That was guilt dressing up as affection. That was a queen consoling the court jester. Another buzz. Leo. Hey man, let me know if you want help finding real work. I might have something at my London branch soon. I turned my phone off. And I broke. Not with rage. But grief. I sat in the dark, the screen of my laptop still glowing in front of me, and I cried. Quietly, like a man who had held in too much for too long. I cried not because they didn't know who I was, but because they never wanted to know. They never asked about my life. Never showed real interest. I had been a silent benefactor to people who wouldn't even call me if their house caught fire. They'd call a cleaner before they called me. That night, I knew something had to change. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed peace. I couldn't keep living this double life. I couldn't keep feeding the very mouths that mocked me. The only way forward was through fire. And I was done pretending I couldn't burn. 3 days after Thanksgiving, I received a strange email from a junior analyst working for a fund tied to my family's hedge firm. It was innocuous at first, just a flagged transaction they couldn't trace. But when I opened the attached report, my stomach tightened. It wasn't a mistake. It was a cover-up. Buried in layers of forged invoices and operational reimbursements was a series of personal transactions. Camille had used company accounts to buy luxury handbags, renovate her beach house, and, get this, hire a private chef for a 3-month networking retreat. Leo's company had billed Robinson Ventures, my father's firm, for marketing services that never happened. But the paper trail led directly to a Shell LLC owned by Leo himself. He was funneling company funds to himself under the radar, avoiding taxes and inflating his valuation for investors. And Dad? He wasn't blind. He was complicit. He'd approved every expense. He'd signed off on every single fraudulent reimbursement, every siphoned dollar, every unethical workaround. For years, I'd assumed their arrogance came from ignorance. But the truth? They weren't just shallow. They were corrupt. And the irony? They were doing it all while being propped up by my money. My patience snapped like a dry twig underfoot. They had spent years mocking me, belittling me, and turning me into a joke, all while living off my success. And worse, they were dragging my reputation, Crescendo's reputation, down with them. That's when it hit me, this wasn't just personal anymore. This was war. I opened my encrypted server and began compiling everything, every document, every invoice, every misappropriation of funds I could trace back to the Robinsons. I looped in a few trusted people on my legal team and gave them one instruction. Build a case. Not just to expose them, but to take back everything they've stolen. That night, I didn't sleep. I didn't cry. I didn't feel pity or anger. I felt focused, dangerously focused. I wasn't just going to confront them. I was going to dismantle them. Brick by brick. Smile by smile. And I would do it in front of the very people they were trying so desperately to impress. The shareholder meeting for Robinson Ventures was in 12 days. I wasn't on the invitation list. I never had been. But they were about to find out who the real stakeholder was. Because unbeknownst to them, through Crescendo's shell entities and hidden holding companies, I had accumulated 38% ownership in Robinson Ventures over the last 3 years. More than Leo. More than Camille. Almost as much as Dad. The next time they laughed, they'd be laughing in a room they no longer controlled. 12 days. That was all I had to prepare. 12 days to build a presentation that would not only expose Camille, Leo, and my father, but show every shareholder in Robinson Ventures just how deep the rot had spread. This wasn't about burning bridges. This was about torching the whole damn estate, and rebuilding something better from the ashes. My first move was assembling a team, quietly. Not the staffers at Crescendo Technologies who knew me as Mr. Dale, and ran machine learning models all day. No, I called in 3 people, my personal lawyer, a forensic accountant who owed me a favor, and a former SEC investigator turned compliance consultant. They worked out of my apartment, surrounded by Chinese takeout cartons, white boards full of asset trails, and a digital pinboard that looked like something out of a crime thriller. We mapped every transaction. Every false expense. Every transfer to Camille's shell accounts in Miami. Every misdirected contract from Leo's company to himself. Even my father's manipulation of board votes through offshore proxies came to light. And here's the sickest part, they weren't just abusing funds, they were leveraging Crescendo's own capital to do it. That's right. My profits had helped fund their fraud. And now? Now I had the receipts. I designed the deck myself, clean, professional, undeniable. Slide after slide showed the flow of money, the fake names, the paper trails leading directly to their doors. Not a single accusation without documentation. Not one number out of place. This wasn't vengeance. It was a mirror, and I was about to hold it up to the ugliest parts of their souls. But I didn't stop there. I had one more play. Remember the 38% stake I owned? It was just shy of a majority, but it was enough to call an emergency shareholder vote, if the others saw cause. And once I presented the evidence, they would. So I contacted the other stakeholders. Not with threats. With transparency. I told them I was concerned about how Robinson Ventures was being run. I told them I had evidence of financial misconduct. I told them they'd get the full report at the meeting, but that I wanted them to show up and keep their minds open. Most were curious. Some were skeptical. But none declined the invitation. Then came the invitation I sent to Camille, Leo, and my father. Subject, regarding next week's shareholder meeting. Dear Camille, Leo, and Charles. It's been a long time since you've seen me in a professional context. That's about to change. I will be in attendance at the upcoming shareholder meeting, not as your brother or son, but as the largest private investor in Robinson Ventures. You've spent years building your empire on illusions. I hope you're ready for reality. Dale. No reply. Not a single word. But I knew they read it. I could feel the tension shift in the air like the pressure before a storm. The night before the meeting, I stood in front of my closet for 10 full minutes. I don't own many suits. That's just never been me. But I picked the sharpest one I had, a charcoal gray blazer, open collar, clean lines. Not because I needed to look powerful. Because I needed to look unfamiliar. The Dale they mocked never wore suits. The Dale they mocked never spoke up. The Dale they mocked was gone. And what they'd meet tomorrow, was the man who paid their mortgages, built their reputations, and was ready to tear down the kingdom they ruled with laughter and lies. The elevator climbed slowly, each ding a countdown to war. I stood alone, briefcase in hand, surrounded by steel and silence. Floor 20. The top floor. The executive conference room of Robinson Ventures, the very house my family had built with charm, lies, and other people's money. I stepped out and pushed open the frosted glass doors. The room went quiet. It was like walking into a play where everyone knew their lines, until I showed up and ripped the script in half. Camille was seated in a sharp cream-colored pantsuit, her phone in hand, pretending not to notice me. Leo leaned back in his chair, oozing fake confidence, tapping his Montblanc pen against the table like he owned the room. And my father, Charles Patterson, sat at the head, stone-faced, hands clasped. Other shareholders were already present. Most of them older investors and finance professionals I'd met through shell corporations or silent meetings. None of them recognized me. Not yet. Camille smirked. Dale, she said, as if tasting the name. Didn't expect to see you here. Lost, or just curious how real companies work? I set the briefcase on the table. No, I said, calmly. I'm exactly where I need to be. Charles spoke next. Let's begin. We have quarterly updates and some new capital disclosures to get through. I opened the case, slowly. Before that, I said, pulling out a single sheet of paper, I'd like to formally file a motion for emergency review of shareholder activity, and request a vote on leadership restructuring due to gross misconduct and financial abuse. You could hear the oxygen leave the room. What the hell are you talking about? Leo snapped, half rising in his seat. I think, I said, laying out the printed report packets, you should all take a look at this first. One by one, I handed out folders to the room. Inside was the full audit, transactions, bank records, signed authorizations, and matching shell accounts linked directly to Camille and Leo. Camille's face went pale. Leo started to speak, but my father raised a hand to silence him. Dale, Charles said slowly, flipping through the pages. Where did you get this? I stood taller. I'm not just your son. I'm the founder and principal stakeholder behind Crescendo Technologies. Through Crescendo's holdings and investment entities, I currently own 38% of Robinson Ventures. There was a stunned pause. A tremor of disbelief rippling through the table. You. Camille choked. You're behind Crescendo. That company's been in the news, what, selling AI products to the government, closing major deals with medical tech firms. Leo's voice broke in. You expect us to believe that you, what, coded your way into buying our company out from under us? No, I said. I funded it. I funded all of you. Your startup. Your beach house. Dad's bailout last year. I looked around the room at the confused but quickly sharpening eyes of the real investors. All of it came from me. I was your safety net. I was your silent bank. And now I'm your reckoning. My father closed his folder slowly. You went behind our backs. No, I said, my voice firmer now. You pushed me out. You laughed at me for a decade while draining the money I gave you. Now I'm done being silent. The meeting exploded. Voices overlapping. One investor demanded clarity. Another asked if legal action was on the table. Camille shouted about defamation. Leo accused me of hacking into private accounts. But nothing they said could undo the paper trail now laid bare. When things finally quieted, I stood again. There's enough here to warrant an SEC investigation, I said. But I'm not here to destroy Robinson Ventures. I'm here to rebuild it, with integrity. And that starts by removing the people who abuse their positions. The vote was called. My father abstained, silent and pale. Every independent shareholder voted in favor of temporary suspension of Camille and Leo, pending investigation. They were removed, on the spot. Camille stood up, livid. You'll pay for this, Dale. I swear, you just buried this family. I looked her in the eyes. No. I'm the only one who tried to save it. And then I walked out. The man who came in a ghost left as a storm. I thought it was over. After the vote, after Camille's meltdown and Leo's shouting match with the board, I believed I'd finally taken back control. I even let myself breathe, just for a moment. But I should have known better. People like my siblings don't lose quietly. 4 days later, I got the call. It was Carla, my legal advisor from Crescendo. Dale, she said. We have a problem. My heart dropped. What kind of problem? Someone just submitted an anonymous complaint to the IRS, alleging Crescendo Technologies has been laundering funds through nonprofit contracts and shell firms. I froze. What? That's a lie. I know, she said. But it's being reviewed. And we traced the initial tip. It came from someone using your brother's personal VPN provider. Leo. He was trying to destroy my company. If they dig far enough, Carla continued, even if it's all clean, your name's in the press now. They'll tear you apart just for the headlines. This was it. The reversal. The counterstrike. Camille and Leo had realized they couldn't win back the company, so they went after my identity. And worse? That wasn't the only twist waiting for me. I logged into our internal systems and noticed something strange. A partner contract for one of our most promising AI projects, a collaboration with a European hospital network, had been cancelled. Why? Because someone had contacted the hospital board, and informed them I was under investigation for fraud. Leo again. Or Camille. Maybe both. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was warfare. I sat back in my chair, exhausted. I'd exposed the truth. I'd won the vote. I'd taken control of Robinson Ventures. But I hadn't counted on how far they would go to scorch the earth on their way out. I had 2 choices. Go public. Fight fire with fire. Start naming names in the media. Launch lawsuits. Or do something they never expected. I took a deep breath. Pulled out a folder I'd kept sealed until now. A contingency plan. See, years ago, before Crescendo was even profitable, I'd built a second structure. A separate holding entity, offshore, clean, and completely insulated from my personal name or Crescendo's branding. I had funneled part of my early crypto gains and seed investments into it. And that entity? It was the majority owner of a media firm with connections to a quiet but influential podcast network and a well-followed tech scandal blog. I never touched it. Never needed it. But now. It was my lifeline. I drafted a single document, a clean, well-referenced exposé titled, How 2 Tech Elites Used Family Ties to Embezzle Millions, and Tried to Bury the Whistleblower. Then I scheduled it for publication under the media company's banner. It would hit inboxes across Silicon Valley the next morning. But I also made a call, to a friend at the Department of Financial Regulation. Not to attack Camille or Leo directly. No. To voluntarily request an audit on Crescendo. I wanted the truth out, on my terms. By the time the media tried to spin it, the regulators would already be inside Crescendo's books, and find everything clean. I wasn't hiding. I wasn't dodging. I was stepping straight into the fire. Because unlike my family, I had nothing to hide. The story broke at 7:03 a.m. Insider blowback, Patterson heirs accused of embezzlement from tech investment empire. That was the headline that lit up inboxes across the industry. Within minutes, it was trending. My exposé, released anonymously through the media company I quietly owned, laid everything bare. Documents, charts, timestamps, no speculation, no fluff. Just receipts. Real ones. But the true masterstroke? The second article, published by a separate outlet that same morning. Crescendo Technologies opens doors to voluntary audit amid smear campaign. The industry response was immediate and overwhelming. Crescendo's transparency didn't just shield us, it catapulted us into the spotlight as a model of ethical tech leadership. Within 48 hours, 3 of the hospital networks that had pulled out reversed their decisions and asked to renegotiate. Investors began pouring in offers, not because they pitied me, but because they trusted me. And Camille and Leo? Their worlds imploded in real time. Camille's bank froze the credit line on her Florida beach house as soon as the allegations hit. Sponsors dropped her from the charity gala board she loved so much. Suddenly, no yacht parties. No champagne. Just silence. Leo's startup plummeted in value. The investors who had believed his inflated numbers now saw the shell game for what it was. A lawsuit was filed by one of his early seed partners, claiming deliberate fraud. His legal costs would devour whatever was left. But the biggest shock came when Dad called. He hadn't spoken to me since the vote. I expected rage. Or regret. Instead, I heard something else in his voice. Dale, he started. I saw the articles. And the audit request. I underestimated you. I said nothing. Let the silence do the talking. I thought keeping the business in the family meant preserving the name, he continued. But I see now, legacy isn't built on names. It's built on values. I didn't expect that. I didn't trust it either, not yet. But he added something else. I'm stepping down, he said. Effective immediately. I'll name a neutral interim chair until this is sorted. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. It wasn't forgiveness. But it was a start. That night, I returned home to my modest apartment, the same one Camille had once mocked. I stood by the window, coffee in hand, watching the city lights flicker. And for the first time, I felt at peace. Not because I'd won. But because I never had to pretend again. They knew now. They all knew. And strangely enough, I didn't hate them anymore. Camille and Leo had made their beds. My father had finally faced his truth. And me? I still had code to write. Apps to build. Lives to impact. Because my success wasn't built on spite, it was built on substance. As I sat at my desk and opened the latest feedback from a rural school using one of our educational apps, I smiled. This quiet, humble, purpose-driven work, was the real victory. And if anyone ever asked how it felt to be laughed at by the people you feed, I'd say this. Let them laugh. Just make sure you're the one writing the check. In the end, truth has a way of surfacing, even if it comes twisted through pain and betrayal. As one wise voice once said, sometimes your greatest enemy was once your closest ally. If this story struck a chord with you, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe, share, and spread the word, because justice deserves to be heard.